Raised outside of Chicago, Dustin Nakao-Haider worked hard to make his way into film and documentary work. Shooting for the stars, he's worked with some of the biggest names, from Dwayne Wade to Jay-Z to Chance the Rapper. And now, one of his films, Shot in the Dark, has aired on national television. Dustin joins us now on Night Talks. Hello. Hi, Dustin.
How's it going?
It's going good. Okay, so I want to start off with one of the heaviest questions that we have, which is, What was the darkest night in your career?
The darkest night. Not starting off with the easy ones. I guess I would say the darkest night was probably one of the nights we were making Shot in the Dark when something pretty bad had happened to the hero of the movie. The kid was going through some really difficult things, and without spoiling the movie, it felt like the actual movie itself might be in jeopardy, and so that was like a really challenging thing to find out and then scramble and figure out what we had to do to make sure the movie could still get made and still happen. That was probably one of the darkest nights in terms of, or at least the first one that comes to mind for sure. Gotcha.
So that's how documentary work works. There's the unexpected.
Always, yeah.
What made you go into documentary?
That's a good question. I had a professor. I went to film school at NYU, and I had a really great professor named Sam Pollard, who's a documentary director, filmmaker. He's directed a lot of great films, but he kind of cut his teeth and made his name known working on all of Spike Lee's documentaries.
That's cool.
Very cool. Yeah. And so when I was early on in film school, I got to take a class with him and kind of learn documentary production through him, and that was around the same time that they made these two films about Hurricane Katrina. The first one was called When the Levees Break, and then they made a sequel called If God Ain't Willin' and the Creek Don't Rise. And that was, so the first one was about the hurricane, and then the second one was about the aftermath of the hurricane. And I got to watch those movies and then go into his office and just ask them about it, and ask them how they made it, and ask them what went into it. And I was like 19 at the time, and somewhere around then, in my early days at NYU, despite knowing that I wanted to make narrative films and I want to get into fiction filmmaking and do all that stuff, I knew that coming out of college that my first bigger project would be a documentary. And I also grew up, watching documentaries, so it wasn't like foreign to me, Yeah. I grew up outside of Chicago. You watch Hoop Dreams at a young age. I think every kid that's interested in basketball and interested in movies probably watches Hoop Dreams. So that was pretty formative as well, just sort of knowing that documentary filmmaking was something that I was interested in. And then it was also like, we're in this era where the access to the equipment and the access to be able to make stuff is so readily available, I think. So it's cool to like know that, I was sort of coming of age as a filmmaker at a time when the ability to even make a documentary was just not easier, because it's never easy, so I don't want to say easy, but more accessible than ever. So all those things kind of multiplied together kind of brought me to making the movie.
Okay. Yeah. So what made you go the independent route? Because we know how it works between indie films versus studio work. And
yeah, I mean, traditionally most documentaries are made independently. I mean, I would say there's a handful of bigger documentaries that probably get made, if it's about a celebrity or something like that. So it wasn't really ever a choice where I was like, should I do it this way or should I do it like the more traditional studio way? At the time, I was freelancing with a production company, and I had the opportunity with them to make the short film that it was based on, that I then expanded into the feature-length version. So it wasn't like there was a choice where I was like, oh, should I go the more normal route? I was always something where we all wanted to, me and the group of people that I was making the movie with, we always wanted to bet on ourselves, so to speak. So, there was a lot of sacrifice, and it meant that we weren't making money while we made the movie.
Right.
And moving to my folks' house, and, just sort of like a lot of the things that are required to make a movie of that scale. And by scale, I mean very tiny. And, in-kind donations and friends and family giving a little bit of money and then putting in my own savings. Those are all choices that we made just because it felt like what was necessary to make the movie. in hindsight, it was probably dumb because it was hard. It was really difficult.
But you got it made.
But we got it made.
Cool. Yeah.
We got it made. But the way our path, without getting into all the nitty gritty, but the path to making the movie, we spent about 2 years funding it out of pocket, in-kind donations. We got a little bit of grant money, but it was mainly our own savings. And then once we had the footage, then we went to the more traditional, not quite studios, but we went to financiers, and we took a round of meetings in LA and New York and tried to find the right partner for the film who then could give us the money to actually edit the film, because documentary editing is where the movie really gets made.
So you kind of touched on the distribution process.
Yeah.
So how did that work?
Yeah, so it's almost like a 3-step process, right? So we had the scrappy, let's shoot this movie as best we can and shoot it. And so we did that first, and that took about 2 years. Then we spent about 16 months trying to find the financing to edit the movie, which was a lot of meetings, a lot of phone calls, a lot of challenges to find the partner that was the right fit for the movie. We found the right fit. That company was called LAMF. They're a production company based in LA. They helped us, give us financing to actually edit the film and hire this incredible editor named Greg O'Toole, who was far more experienced than I was, and more experienced than a lot of the people who worked on the film too. He's won a bunch of Emmys and edited a 30 for 30 and the Two Escobars. And it was important for us when we were all rookies to like hire the veteran to be the editor, because they have so much say in terms of how the story's constructed with me and with the other producers to make the movie. And then once that was done, we had a version of the movie, and we always knew we wanted to go the traditional kind of festival route, which is the more, I mean traditional for independent films. We wanted to premiere at a festival, and then hopefully find our distribution outside of that. Unfortunately for us, we didn't get into any of the festivals we wanted to get to. So like we didn't get into Sundance, we didn't get into South by, we didn't get into Tribeca. Sundance, we weren't ready for. The version of the film that got submitted, I don't think we were ready for. The version of the film that got submitted to Tribeca and we got rejected, that one hurt. So that was probably the second darkest night, if I were to name the other like more personal career dark night when we didn't get into Tribeca. Then it was like, oh gosh, what's this movie? But we still had, Dwayne Wade was still attached at that time. He had seen the movie earlier and was really a big champion of it. And the financing company was still a big champion of it. And the agency that we were working with, everyone was still super on board with the movie. So despite being independent, at this point we kind of put together a team around it that was really supportive of the version of the movie that got rejected from Tribeca. And so the agents and everyone kind of just decided that we should just start bringing this to distributors anyway. So the film got screened for a handful of people, including the people at Fox who ended up taking the movie. And then we became part of their documentary series called Magnify. And we premiered on Magnify in February 2018. And then after that, after we knew that the film was going to go to Fox, then we got to go do a handful of festivals. So it was not the normal route by any stretch. It's like very kind of backwards, where we sold the movie, but we had to keep it secret. And then we were able to go to a handful of festivals. So we premiered, our first screening of the film was at this film festival in Maine called Camden Film Festival, Camden International Film Festival, which is an incredible like seaside festival where it's very tight knit and like a couple blocks of a small town in Maine. And we were the opening night film there.
Okay, so you told me a lot about your journey and how your film got moved around on the circuit with film festivals and that whole financing process. But what was it like when you came straight out of college trying to get the movie made? What sacrifices did you have to make to get to that point?
There were a lot of sacrifices kind of along the way with the process. I mean, when I graduated from college, I was kind of lucky because I had found a group of people that were equally hungry and passionate about what they were doing, but also equally clueless about what to do and how to do it. But we were lucky in the sense that we came out of college. There was about maybe 7 of us. We all moved into one tiny apartment, and that was our office. That was where we met. That was our editing suite. That was our everything.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was cool. Not for our dating lives, but for like everything else, maybe it was kind of cool. But yeah, we kind of bunkered down and we were freelancing. I mean, it sounds more glamorous than it is because we were freelancing for Roc Nation, which is Jay-Z's company, and that was sort of our main client.
This is a big deal.
Yeah, but we were doing work that wasn't paying us a whole lot,
Gotcha.
but because we were 21, 22, and the name Jay-Z is like resonant because we're all, huge fans of his music and what he's done for the culture and all this sort of stuff. It was like, how could we say no to an opportunity like this? So we were producing short documentaries for his now defunct website called Life and Times. So in terms of sacrifice, like I said, we had all kind of went all in on that. It wasn't a way to pay like really good salaries or anything like that, but at the same time, it was something where we could learn by doing, which I think is an important thing to do. When we were young, it's like I knew I wanted to make a documentary. I was pitching short documentaries, I was directing short documentaries, I was editing them, and I was just kind of getting my reps up, so to speak, because I was just able to do stuff like that. And then through them, I was able to find, like, I could pitch whatever I want, and we had a long creative leash there, which was great. And so I told them that first year I was working with them, I was like, I want to do something about high school basketball in Chicago.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the entry point into starting to make Shot in the Dark when I was still working with them. But in terms of sacrifices, it was a matter of, finding like-minded people and all kind of knowing that, like, this isn't going to be the easiest road, but equal measures of passion and finding the right way to kind of like channel that into our work. So with making the movie, it was a matter of subletting my apartment and moving back to my parents' house. Yeah. And, I know a lot of kids have to move back to their parents' house, but like I was actually moving back to my parents' house to save money and put in the money that I had saved in New York back into the movie to buy equipment, buy hard drives, and just sort of all that sort of stuff. And it's not something that I would often recommend for young filmmakers just to like put their own money on the line, so to speak. There's all these opportunities with Kickstarter and GoFundMe's and all these other ways. Crowdfunding, crowdsourcing. Yeah. I just didn't want to do it because I had done it for my college project, and I just felt some level of guilt for asking people, and I was like, I can do this cheaply, I don't need much, and I'm gonna do it. And then my cinematographer and the other producer I was working with, we all were on the same page to do that, so we did it that way. And then I was still able to freelance a little bit, but I wasn't making any money. So if I were to be honest with myself, I could say that I went broke. I went broke maybe 3 or 4 times making the movie. So
did you ever think about quitting?
I honestly never thought about quitting. This was kind of always what I wanted to do. It was always what I thought I would do. And I kind of blindly let that passion or dream or goal kind of just pull me forward. I think I was young enough and dumb enough to not know anything different, but I was also lucky enough to have the support of my family and then the support of my friends and people that were, confused why I would, kind of not sacrifice, but sort of give up working with Roc Nation to a certain extent to fully focus on working on making the documentary. But at the same time, I felt like it felt urgent and it felt necessary.
Right.
Living in New York, you saw so many horrible media narratives about the city of Chicago, about the way that the gang violence was characterized there in the neighborhoods that I filmed in. And I just knew that it couldn't be true, but I had to figure it out for myself. So I think being in New York at that time kind of gave me the distance to be like, something's going on here. I don't know what exactly it is, but I have to do my part to kind of like lend some other voice to what's happening there. And for me, that was, through the lens of basketball as opposed to any other way, I guess.
Okay, so tell me how you kept your team's momentum going.
While we were making the movie, we kind of made the commitment early on to know that we were going to be following the main kid for his last 2 years of high school. So there was never any question about ever stopping that. The framing of the story was so different, I think, when we first started, because I had made the short film and I had met these 2 kids, Taekwon, the main kid, and then Marquise, his teammate. And every time I go home to Chicago, I kind of keep up with them and check in on them and try and do it. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I want to make this into a full-length movie, but I hadn't done it. I had just made the short film.
Yeah.
And then in December of 2012, August of 2012, Marquise got arrested, and he was on the front cover of the Tribune, and that was sort of my call to action moment when it was like, all right, guys, like if we want to make this movie, we got to go make it. And so initially I thought the film was going to be about this kid goes to jail, he comes out, the team's super happy because he's out, and then they go off and win the championship, and it's the happily ever after story. You guys can watch it and find out if that actually happens, but it doesn't. And, you know, the reality of it is much more complicated and nuanced. But point being is that was the framework we were working within, is we knew this one kid was in jail, and now the main kid we were following, Taekwon, he was going to have to step up and be a bigger leader for the team, and that felt dramatic and something worth filming, but we were always going to follow him till the end of high school. So in terms of momentum, the energy we all had was to know that we were going to be following this journey for at least 2 years through high school. So there was never any question that we would or would not do that.
Okay. I want to backtrack a tiny, tiny bit. Mm-hmm. How exactly did you find the school and the players?
Yeah, it's a interesting story because the team that I worked with, our team was really big, but at the beginning, our core team was myself, the cinematographer, Ben Vogel, and then the producer, Daniel Poneman. That was sort of like our first team. It was just the three of us. All three of us went to the same high school, Evanston High School, right outside of Chicago. And Ben went to art school at SCAD. I went to NYU. We knew of each other. We had worked together a little bit, but we hadn't really committed to working with each other. And then Daniel, the producer, was not a filmmaker at all. He was actually a basketball scout. And so his story is wild. And you can look, he's had articles written about him in Sports Illustrated and the New York Times, but he was dubbed the Boy Scout because he was about 15 years old, and not to get nitty gritty into basketball, but he was 15 years old when Derrick Rose was a senior in high school. And so he kind of fell into the Chicago basketball world as a scout, but as a teenager. Most of the scouts are super old, like old school guys that have all these old connections, and it's like, I don't know, it's kind of a stale world in a way. And he was super young, and he just connected with all these kids and made friends with them and started helping them get to colleges. And there's all this kind of like shady stuff that happens with kids trying to go to these colleges, but he was very pure and his morals were really clean, and so he had this really honest connection with these different kids. And so he did this for years, and he would facilitate all of these different kids from the city and the suburbs of Chicago going off to college and getting scholarships. And he was one of the best at it. He put, again, not to do nitty-gritty basketball, but he discovered Anthony Davis.
Oh, that's big. That's a big deal.
He had put Jabari Parker in his first All-Star game in 8th grade, like all these guys that have gone on to have amazing careers in the NCAA and the NBA. He was early on with all of them. So when I knew that I was going to try and make this movie, it was around all the Anthony Davis stuff had gone on. So his profile was pretty big, but also I knew this kid. We went to high school together. We'd known each other for years and years. And so I reached out to him thinking that I wanted to do a documentary about Jabari Parker. And he was like, Jabari, like he's going to go to Mormon camp this summer. I don't know if we'll be able to get him. Like, who knows? And so he was like, what about these other kids? And he sent me a list of a bunch of other players. And for whatever reason, we still talk about it to this day. We don't know why, but Taekwon, the kid, the star of Shot in the Dark, was the first one on that list. And we found the original email where he sent it to me. And I don't know. It just like, he just sort of leapt off. He was relatively unknown. He wasn't I knew about Jabari Parker and I was in New York, whereas I'd never heard of this kid Taekwon. So he was sort of unknown at a program that was not well heralded or big in the city, but was in a intense neighborhood, in a challenging neighborhood, but also like they were doing something there that was super special, and it was at its early stages. So it felt like a really special time and place to kind of be there with him. And so that was the short film. So we filmed with him as the kind of David, and then the Goliath. This is the short film, which is I think still on YouTube. It's called Ball So Hard, because everything had to have a Jay-Z title back then. And really, like actually, we had all of our titles of our projects had to be Jay-Z songs or lyrics. I mean. Anyway, so the short documentary was about Taekwon as sort of the David, and then we had Jaleel Okafor and his teammate Paul White, who both went on to play D1, and Jaleel plays for the Pelicans now. But they were at Whitney Young, which is the high school where Michelle Obama went to.
Yeah.
So it's one of the best public schools in the city. It's a big magnet, but it's like maybe 3 miles away from the school that Taekwon goes to, but it's basically like two different worlds.
Right.
So we wanted to do something that contrasted the sort of the haves and the have-nots of the city.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of our starting point. And then I thought when I made the feature-length movie, it would continue to kind of be this David and Goliath thing where we'd have the kids at Orr in the more challenging school and then the kids at, you know, the Obama alma mater. But once we kind of committed to shooting with Orr, the fancier high school wanted nothing to do with us. They're like, you guys made your choice. Like, we don't want you to film. So we just sort of fully committed to filming at Orr. And yeah, it was all, there's no hard feelings. It was all for the better.
Gotcha. So everyone has a story to tell. How do you decide which ones are told?
To determine what stories to tell, I mean, for me, like, I love basketball. Like, I love all parts of the game. I watch it. I play it above average. That may be a stretch.
Okay, I'm sure you can play.
Yeah, I like to play it. I like to watch it. I like to talk about it. I like to think about it. And that passion I've had for basketball has existed since I was a kid. You know, I grew up in Chicago while Michael Jordan was like being Michael Jordan.
A legend, yeah.
So that was like an easy entry point for me as a kid. And then I'm also passionate about the city that I'm from. You know, the complications and the challenges the city faces, but also what I find to be all the inherent beauty in it that I think a lot of people overlook. But yeah, my thought process in sort of making something and deciding this was the story I wanted to tell, it's like I felt like if I could translate my obsession with basketball, which is like endless, if I could translate that into like a 90-minute movie and then have someone that doesn't really care about basketball sit down and watch it, then I've done my job, you know, and they can just feel a bit of what I care about for at least, you know, a seat on the couch while I deal with my obsession for the rest of my life. But I do think it's important to like figure out the thing that you care about, figure out the thing that you're passionate about, because that's what will guide you, you know. You don't know where the road will take you, but at least if you have the kind of guiding light of that internal passion, it'll take you all sorts of places. You know, I never expected when we started to make the movie that we'd have people like Dwayne Wade or Chance the Rapper attached to it. It was never in my wildest dreams that could have happened. But I do think it's something when you've dedicated yourself to something as simple of a passion as basketball or the city of Chicago, where it can take you. So I think that applies across the board to anything that anyone could care about.
Cool. So you're following your passion. How do you abandon any preconceived notions you might have about the individuals whose story you're telling to tell like an unfiltered story?
That's also a really great question. I mean, for me, it's always a matter of like taking a humanist perspective in the filmmaking.
Yeah.
By which I mean it's like really easy, especially when you have a camera, to like look down on someone pedantically and think that you know everything about them. Or the alternative side that you see in a lot of sort of more, I won't name names, but other types of filmmaking is you look up at them and you sensationalize it and you make it something it isn't. But then I think the reality is that like everybody has a mom, everybody's got dreams, everyone's got hopes and fears and anxieties and concerns. And if you can look at someone on that level, at the eye level, you know, not above or not below, but really honestly at eye level, you can connect, I think, with anyone, you know, across any kind of cultural anything. It applies. What was the question?
No, you covered it.
Okay,
you got
cool.
it. Yeah, down
Sick.
to the human truth.
Yes. Just trying to find the common humanity between people, because that's where anyone can connect. My circumstances growing up were super different than the kids that I filmed at with Shot in the Dark, but at the same time, we both had hopes. We both had dreams.
Exactly.
We both had fears. And that's a way to build a connection with anyone, with or without a camera.
Right,
So.
exactly. Okay, so do you feel like your investment in the film was worth it?
Absolutely. I wouldn't trade my investment in the film for anything. I wouldn't necessarily do it again. I think the first time was enough, but now that I feel like I've made one film and I've worked on some other projects, I at least have afforded myself the ability to like partner with different production companies and not feel like, okay, I'm going to sink all of my savings into another movie and go broke 3 more times and all that sort of stuff.
Okay, so tell me about the biggest outcome from your experience.
I mean, it'd be easy to talk about like getting nominated for awards and, you know, kind of the success that the movie has had since then or in any other project. But for us, the biggest goal going into making the movie was making sure that we did something that we felt like was going to give back to the community to a certain extent. That was always important. So the basketball scout producer that I mentioned, Daniel Poneman, he had, even before Shot in the Dark, the movie was done, he had been running these camps where he helped kids get into colleges where, like, basically, you know, every year at the end of the basketball season, there's all these kids that are looking for scholarships, looking for a chance to not only keep playing basketball, because that's not what it's about, but about a chance to get a free education. And these aren't the kids that are going to Kentucky or North Carolina. These are kids that are going to Division IIIs, maybe Division IIs, junior colleges, that sort of thing. So he was already kind of started doing these camps to try and help kids find colleges. But with the kind of profile of the movie and the spotlight that the movie had, we kind of combined what he was doing into what we call the Shot in the Dark Foundation. And then within the foundation, we have the Prospect Showcase. That is what I'm referring to. And so every spring, both boys and girls basketball players will come together at this gym in Chicago. The location changes every year, but roughly like about 200 kids will come, and then about 150 college coaches from different colleges from all around the country will come, and then they'll scrimmage for a weekend. And afterwards, roughly about 75% will walk away that weekend with college scholarships.
That's so cool.
So that's like something that was really important for us. And there's also coaching workshops and leadership programs and other stuff that we're trying to do as well. But I think it was either last year or the year before, it was the first year that one of the kids from the first Prospect camps has come back, has graduated college, is now a coach at the camp. So it's kind of like, you know, the system is kind of supporting itself. Yeah, exactly. That's cool. And Taekwon and Marquise have coached some of the teams, and they come back and they do a little bit too. That's so cool. So it's been really great just to find ways that we can give some level of support to the city that supported us while we made the movie. So there's the Shot in the Dark Foundation is something that we do, or that exists online, and then the showcase is what we do every spring.
That's nice. The legacy of the film continues. That's really cool. Okay, so you learned a lot during the process. I learned a lot from you. What can you tell me that you would tell yourself, your younger self, like the 6 years before finishing the film self, about getting through your darkest night?
Keep going. Like, don't be afraid, but actually, like, maybe do be afraid. Like, be a little bit scared. Because if you're not scared, then like I'd be worried for you, you know. Like the right amount of nerves and the right amount of fear can be a motivating factor as well. But yeah, keep pushing. Like, don't give up. Like, you don't know where the road will take you, but you got to know that you got to keep marching down it, and it'll be worth it in the end. And you know, kind of trust yourself and trust your instincts, because that's all you can kind of rely on at the end of the day.
Well, this was fun.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I had a fun time.
Me too.
Well, that's all the time we have for now. As always, have a good night.